Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the SNES30 from 8bitdo. This is a replica Bluetooth SNES controller that works with your PC, your Mac, and your Android devices, and it also works with the original Super Nintendo with this adapter that you can buy separately. It really is pretty cool how all of this stuff works, and what's neat about this adapter is that in addition to working with the Super Nintendo, it works with your PC to allow this controller to work via Xinput, and I'll show you what all that means here a little later in the review. So there's a lot to look at here with what seemed to be on the surface a very simple product. Now I do want to mention in the interest of full disclosure that I purchased both of these items with my own funds, so all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review and no one is reviewing this content before it is posted. Alright, so let's start off with a look at the hardware. It really does mimic the original Super Nintendo controller in just about every way. So I've got an original controller here, which of course is a wired controller, and it's about the same thickness. It's got the very same dimensions. It even kind of has that wedge shape to it as well. So in the hand, it really does feel about the same, and it's about the same weight as well, although you don't have that cable tethering you down all the time. So it's kind of a freeing experience to have a very familiar controller in the hand that isn't tethered by a wire, which was a nice experience. The one thing that I noticed on it that was a little different was the D-pad. Now, this controller is probably 25 years old or more, so its D-pad feels a bit squishier than the 8bitdo one does. It feels a little springier and a little stiffer than this older controller, but I don't remember what this thing felt like when it was new. So it's very likely that this one is just worn out or worn in, and this one hasn't gotten there yet. So it does feel a little springier. That's the only real big change that I really noticed on this. The plastic is very high quality. It feels like it will survive just as well as the originals did. Very, very nice, high quality replica that's not a junky kind of thing. Cost on this controller, by the way, is $35, and the retro adapter that will connect it up with a original Super Nintendo and provide some PC functionality is another $25. So a bit of an investment, but it does actually feel like a good investment for the price. The buttons on the side here are also mimicking the original Super Nintendo feel. So you'll remember the B and A buttons are rounded, where the Y and X buttons are concave, and they have mimicked that as well on here, although the concave feels a little bit deeper on the Super Nintendo controller versus the 8bitdo thing here. But honestly, if you haven't picked up a Super Nintendo controller in a while, if you pick this up, you're going to have a hard time not feeling like this is a legit Super Nintendo controller. So they have done a lot of good things making this feel and look like the original did, even down to matching the color up on it too. So really, really nice hardware that I am quite pleased with. There is a battery inside that in Bluetooth mode they say will last about 20 hours. I don't really have any anything to indicate that you won't get that kind of battery life when playing games on it, so it does feel pretty decent there. Compatibility is pretty extensive, so it works with the Mac, it works with the PC, it works with Android. You can choose to use Bluetooth, or you can plug it in directly via USB. So in addition to charging the controller, you can actually plug the controller in here. So if you're having any Bluetooth latency issues with your hardware, you can just do a direct connection and you're good to go. They also indicated that there is iOS compatibility, which is true to some degree, but you are going to fall into a compatibility issue because most of the newer iOS titles support this new Apple controller standard that came out a couple of years ago that this controller does not support. So this will work with the older iCade standard. So if your game that you're looking to play supports iCade, this will work with it, but if it supports only the Apple protocol, this will not. A couple of other interesting things is that it's compatible with the Wii as well. So you can pair this up with your Wii console and play some of your virtual console games with this controller. So that is a pretty neat thing to be able to do on there. So they've added a lot of compatibility, and it's firmware upgradable, so they will be trying to add additional functionality down the road. All right, so let's take out my NVIDIA Shield tablet here. We'll play a quick game and see how it functions here so you can get a feel for the latency on the controller. It feels pretty good. It feels about where most other decent Bluetooth controllers are. And again, you could probably plug this in via a USB OTG cable to your Android device if you wish. It'll also work with Android TV devices like the NVIDIA Shield TV and the Mi Box as well. So as you can see here, the button response is really good. It actually doesn't have a lot of noticeable latency here. It really feels, as I'm playing the game here, pretty responsive and very close to what it feels like to be holding a Super Nintendo controller, which is something you might want to have when you're playing one of these Super Nintendo games. So really cool to be able to get a retro-inspired controller that really does match the look and feel of the original and performs pretty nicely over Bluetooth. Now, it also connected up very nicely with my Windows PC and my Mac via Bluetooth, as well as the USB option. For PC gamers, you should know, though, that by default it doesn't connect via Xinput, but if you connect up the little retro receiver, which we currently have in our Super Nintendo, it will give you that functionality, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But what I did want to do first is just show you how the retro receiver works on an original Super Nintendo. So I took out my old dusty television here from college, and I've got my controller out here. As you can see, the response rate on the adapter here is very good. It's a across the room kind of range, so you could put this on your CRT TV or your HD TV if you want, and play your Super Nintendo games like you couldn't play them before with an actual functional wireless controller here. And as you'll see here as it boots up, it is just as responsive as it was when I had it plugged into the Android tablet, maybe even a little bit better because we're on the actual hardware now. So really cool experience to be able to take out a wireless controller and plug it into your Super Nintendo and get the same gameplay functionality to it. Now, what's interesting is that this little adapter is powered by the Super Nintendo's controller port. So there's no battery to charge. It just works off the power that the Super Nintendo is providing over that controller port. So it must be a Bluetooth low energy technology. Whatever it is, it works. Now, what's really cool, though, is you're not limited to just using the 8bitdo controller with their retro receiver. So you can actually pair up modern game controllers like this Wii U Pro controller with the receiver here. In fact, there's no extra steps to jump through. You just put the controller into pairing mode and push the button on the front of the thing here, and you can then use your modern controller with your retro console, which is pretty cool. It supports the PS3 controller as well as the PS4 controller and Wii controllers too, and it seems to be working pretty well. It doesn't work with just regular Bluetooth controllers, though, so you can use the 8bitdo controller, PS3, PS4, and some of these Wii controllers. Now, on the PS3 controller, there is a little bit more work to be done. You have to install some drivers on your PC and pair it up on the PC first and then bring it over. But from reading the instructions, the PS4 controller will pair up directly with it. So very cool to have that functionality on this device. Now what I want to do is power off the Super Nintendo. And by the way, this little science experiment on the cartridge slot there, I'll put a link to a review I did of that little adapter card so you can see what that's all about in the video description. I'm going to power this off now. We're going to bring my laptop over and we're going to see how well this will function as a regular Bluetooth controller on PC, but also what kind of functionality hooking up this retro receiver will do for our PC gameplay. So let's go get that PC and try it out. All right, so I've got the controller plugged into the Dell now, and we're going to go pop over to its screen to see how everything is functioning here. So you can see that insofar as the Windows direct input is concerned, it's seeing it as a joystick. The control panel is reporting that it is functional as a joystick, and some things that support that mode will work fine. However, it's not showing up as an Xinput device here, and you'll see that this little joystick testing application I got off the Windows Store called Game Controller Tester. It's a really cool little app. Is not showing any Xinput devices, which means that games like Shovel Knight here don't seem to work with the 8bitdo controller while it's plugged in. I can push all the buttons I want, but I can't get through even the menu here, and it's not showing any controller being available to configure here. So what I'm going to do now is disconnect the controller. I'm going to plug in the retro receiver with its USB port here on the side of it. So watch what happens on Shovel Knight now. The second I hook up this adapter here, you'll see that controller now become editable, and if I boot up the controller again, it tends to go to sleep after a few minutes of inactivity. I can now go back here and use the controller to play the game. So it is now giving us functionality through that retro receiver that we didn't have natively. Now, I think there are ways that you can configure these controllers with some additional software to be Xinput compatible if your device doesn't support that, but it's pretty cool that you can have a driverless piece of hardware here that has this dual purpose. It is an Xinput device and it's a receiver for your retro game console, and it seems to be working here very nicely. So we can go run through the game real quick here, and you can see what the response rate is on the controller here. I should note while I'm getting the game loaded up here that there are versions of this controller and retro receiver for the NES as well. Now this controller will actually work with the NES receiver receiver, as will the NES controller work with this receiver. So they have a few different options available. There's even one that works with the old Apple IIs as well. I guess they did a Kickstarter a little while ago. So that is the 8bitdo SNES30 game controller, and I'm quite pleased with this. I really like the build quality of it. It feels like a really solid controller that's not a cheap knockoff, and I really like the versatility that this little adapter brings to the game. When I bought it, I was just thinking it was going to work with my Super Nintendo and that's it, but it really does have greater functionality beyond that. It is a one-to-one pairing though, so you can't do two players through this like you might through the Xbox adapters that you can get for your PC. But if you're looking to connect up a retro controller that feels exactly like a Super Nintendo to your computer to play Shovel Knight or some other retro-inspired game that only works with Xinput, pretty convenient, driverless piece of hardware, and you are ready to go. Again, they have a few other versions of these controllers. They have an NES version with 4 buttons that's available, and they also have now something you can plug into your NES Mini to get these controllers working with it as well. So they've got a whole family of products. I'll try to link to as many as I can down below in the video description. But if you are looking for a very authentic Super Nintendo retro controller for your retro games or your retro-inspired games, this one is definitely worth taking a look at, along with its little adapter here. This is Lon.TV, and thanks for watching. This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.